Telling you, huh? Woo! Told you, we're starting a new series. Hey, that's why I put them up first so that, you know what? It doesn't matter. Wow, right? P.T. Barnum said that the noblest art is that of making others happy. I love the circus. I'm telling you, the sights, the sounds, even the smells. I'll tell you, you know, I'm not a fan of popcorn, not a fan of cotton candy, but there's just something, you get those smells and peanuts and yes, even the animals. And there's just energy. There's just life. There's love. There's laughter. It's just, man, it's mystical. It's invigorating. It's exciting. It's intoxicating. It's just so amazing. No matter how old you are, the circus just seems to make you feel young again. Everything else just seems to fade into the background as the circus takes center ring, pun intended. You hear those words? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, get ready for the greatest show on earth. And you just get goosebumps. And you feel it bubbling up inside you. And you're just like, wow. I mean, everything that I think of when I think of the circus revolves around fun, joy, laughter, love. There's nothing quite like it. Unfortunately, on May 21st, 2017, after 146 consecutive years of running without missing a show, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, the greatest show on earth, dropped the big top for the last time. It is sad. But see, here's the problem. It wasn't because it had run its course. It wasn't because they ran out of money. It wasn't even because people lost interest. It was because of all those ists. You know them, the elitists, the activists, those ists. You know, trying to push a narrative that didn't exist. Trying to create issues where there wasn't. Because they're so miserable, they're so sullen and sad in their lives that they just want to remove all the joy from everyone. Make things drab, bland, so that everything looks the same. Everything flows the same. Everything follows the same. These are the people who want you and I to feel guilty for things we're not guilty of. To apologize for things that, no offense, was ever offended. And to take responsibility for things that, quite frankly, we're just not responsible for. Oh, I know, there's a whole argument behind all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. But here's kind of what it boils down to for me. If you're not miserable, if you don't feel miserable, then you are a miserable person. You got to feel bad. You have to have some sort of angst about you, or you're just not a good person. I know, I'm just saying. You know, if you don't agree with the group think, then they got a whole list of labels they're going to put on you. You know them, you hear them all the time. And you're afraid to say something because you're afraid that all of a sudden now you are going to have that label. I get it. I understand it. It's not fair, it's not right, but quite frankly, that's the reality. And see, it's not just outside the church. This has now come into the church. I read an interview earlier in the week with John Cooper, the lead singer for Skillet. And he was talking about this. He's saying that, he was saying that one of the difficult issues has to do with language and definition of terms. See, here's the thing. We say the same word, but somehow your definition and my definition don't quite match up. So we don't even know what the other's talking about. You think you're on the same page because the terminology sounds right, he says, but there's something off. He said it took him several years to realize people were just simply changing definitions of terms. This person may be talking about justice, this other person may be talking about justice, but they may mean two different things. So he suggests that maybe you just ask for some clarity, some clarification of a person's terminology. I agree with that, but I also caution you because here's the thing, the minute you do that, they shut down a lot of times. They go, well, you just don't understand, so you just don't. And so we can't even have a conversation anymore because you start to have a conversation, somebody wants to fight you. I don't understand this. When did it become not okay to have a differing opinion without hating someone for a different opinion or being hated for your different opinion? He says, honest conversations are really hard to have these days because people are ready to fight. And he says, I pray, I'm not suggesting I always do a good job of this, but I always do pray that I could be full of the Spirit of God in order to be gracious towards someone that I disagree with. I can't be responsible if they will reciprocate that to me. And I know that I have strong opinions and I say things firmly, but I really want to have those conversations. See, part of the problem is that you have a society now who has decided that history needs to be rewritten. Historical facts need to be altered to fit a specific narrative that they want pushed. That it's no longer okay to agree on the history. We need to change it so that we can feel bad about who we are and make others feel good about who they are. Quite frankly, I don't think that's the effect that it has when you do that. But you see, here's the thing. You know who's not shocked? God. See, Paul wrote a letter to Timothy thousands and thousands of years ago, and he reminded Timothy that he needs to preach the word in season, out of season. In other words, whether it's favorable or not. This doesn't mean, in spring, summer. He's saying you need to preach the word whether it is favorable or not. Whether people are flocking to grasp the word or not, you are to preach the word. And he follows that with some very uncomfortable words for our ists fans out there. He says, correct, rebuke, exhort with great patience and instruction. And then here he comes. He says, for the time will come when they will not tolerate sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance with their own desires, and they will turn their ears away from truth and turn aside to myths. Written thousands of years ago, folks. Thousands and thousands of years ago. And we see it happening in front of us. Oh, no, we're a lot of us don't want to admit that because it's like, but the truth is, it's happening. And see, part of the reason, I don't want to put this all off on, a particular group or groups of individuals, because here's the problem. It's your problem. It's my problem. It's the problem of those who succumb to this because they do. I have a new favorite term. I heard it, don't remember where I heard it, but I like it. I like it a lot. Because what we do is we simply outsource our intellect. In other words, we let other people tell us what something means. You guys even do it in church. And I mean you guys, I'm just meaning in general. You know, you come to church, hey, well, the pastor said this, and you don't go any further than that. Although I tell you over and over and over and over and over, don't take my word for it. Research it for yourself. But the problem is people are lazy. They don't want to take the time to find out for themselves what truth is and how to apply it in their lives. So today, like I said, we're beginning our new series, The Greatest Show. And yes, it was inspired by the movie The Greatest Showman, because, you know, only Wolverine could play P.T. Barnum. And it's funny, folks, I am not a fan of musicals, but I am a Hugh Jackman fan. And years ago when they first came out, I didn't realize it was a musical. I'm like, oh, I want to see that, man. Hugh Jackman, oh, that's cool. P.T. Barnum, because again, I'm a circus. I am just like, I love the circus, so it was like really cool, right? I didn't realize it was a miracle. I was just so into it. Hugh Jackman and P.T. Barnum, great, you know? And then about a month or so ago, you know, the girls, remember when Ashley did her, about a month or so ago, you know, the girls, remember when Ashley did her bucket drum thing at Christmas? Well, their music class, they used that song. They were going to do another routine with that one. And I was like, oh, wow. And we started talking about the girls. Man, they kept talking about all kinds of stuff about it. And all of a sudden, they're like, yeah, it's a musical, Dad. I'm like, what? Because Jeannie told him, Dad's not going to watch that. It's a musical. But see, here, I already committed. So, you know, musical, I'm like, all right, I'm in, whatever. Here's what I love. Like the song the girls did, the movie starts with that. And so it just kind of punches you in the mouth right away. So you're like, ooh. But as I'm watching the movie, I'm seeing a lot of themes and a lot of things. And then, you know, it got my pastor juices flowing, right? And I couldn't get that song out of my head. Partly because the girls played it 50,000 times a day. And literally in 1 week. And watched the movie 7 times. But it just kept rolling. And I told Jeannie, I don't know, was it 2 weeks ago? I was like, you know, I said, I can't. I said, I got this, I think, you know, I can do something with this. And so I sat down 2 weeks ago and started working it out. And then I went to Jeannie and I'm like, I think this could be a series. I started looking at the whole thing. You know, it's a musical. You got a lot of cool songs and stuff, right? A lot of good message. But I was like, wow. And so that's how it developed. But what I want y'all to understand, we're not here to talk about the circus. I know. I mean, we could do that, but and we're not here to talk about P.T. Barnum. Oh. And again, he's another guy who, you know, real history hasn't been favorable to, but we'll get in that at some point, maybe. So you may be wondering, what does a circus have to do with the Bible, with God, with Jesus, and with you? To that I say, welcome to the greatest show. And as we turn to the song that opened our message today, I'm going to share a few things that I learned from The Greatest Showman and how God spoke to me and inspired me. See, if we remain open to His Spirit, like I was talking about last week in our message, we may be surprised at just how He can lead us, speak to us, and inspire us to seek Him out more frequently and more fully. See, God can get our attention if we're just willing to be open and allow Him to move in us and lead us. As I said last week, his Spirit is always present, always leading, always drawing, always nudging. And so, as we start today, I want to start with an idea that I believe is the reason for all the division, the chaos, the disorder that we spoke about earlier. And it's found in one of the clips of the lyric. Like I say, we're going to kind of use the song. And so the song the girls just did. And the line goes, buried in your bones, there's an ache that you can't ignore. Whose image, whose likeness are we created in? So whether we admit it or not, and again, I'm not asking anyone to admit anything they're not comfortable admitting, but whether you admit it or not, again, if you're into science and you believe the science, then it's in your DNA. And we wonder, we just feel like, I remember before I got saved, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't put my finger, it was something. It was something. And I don't know what that was like for y'all individually, but I know it was something. It was like, I couldn't put my finger, it was a nudge, a pull, something. But now I know. It was God. It was His Holy Spirit inviting me. But here's the thing. Even if we didn't sing His praises, creation would. Jesus said, I can tell them to be quiet, but the rocks will cry out. Because you can't ignore. Buried in your bones, there's an ache that you can't ignore. You can pretend it's not there. You can pretend it ain't happening. But the reality is you cannot ignore it. Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans, he said, for what may be known about God is plain to them. Because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power, divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from His workmanship, so that men are without excuse. Again, you can make all the excuses. You can pretend it ain't so. But the bottom line is, it's just the way it is. It was funny, we were watching, y'all ever see that show, Ellen's Game of Games? That's a funny game show. I'm like, I told Jeannie when we first saw him, I'm like, see, that's the kind of game show I could do. I could run that game show. Yeah, see, y'all know, right? But one of the things on there, like, we found out that, did you know that we share 50% of our DNA with a banana? Interesting, isn't it? Why is that? And no, it's not because we came from some pool of sludge out of the middle of nowhere. It's because the same one who created you, who created me, created that banana. And His fingerprints are all over it. His DNA is all over it. Why is it that we can use animal organs, right? It's not some fantastical, oops, wow, look at that. This is by design. This is meant to happen. Because buried in your bones, there's an ache that you can't ignore. Because each one of us, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we admit it or not, have a God-sized hole in our lives that we try to fill with too many things that don't belong. Cannot and never will be able to fill it. Money, prestige, power, fame, fortune, relationships, Romans 1:25 says that they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped it and served the creation rather than the Creator. And we wonder why we're miserable. We wonder why people are miserable. Because here's the thing. I told you before. Anything, if you build your life on anything, that thing can be taken from you. Just look at your lives, how they've already gone through, things that you've lost. Things that you counted on that are no longer there, or people you loved who are gone. And if you build your life on those things, those people, and that's all your life is about, then yes, your life will crumble, and there will be something missing. I'm not saying you won't miss them still, but here's the thing. God, Jesus, cannot be taken from you. They tried that over 2,000 years ago. Guess what? It didn't work. You can give up on Jesus, but no one can ever take him from you. Because he is a choice you and I make. I've said it before, I'll say it again. People will let you down. Things will break. You'll have to replace things. You'll have to, upgrade. But Jesus will never let you down. He never breaks. He doesn't need an upgrade. And there's nothing that can replace him. People have been trying since the beginning of time to replace him. And this is why people are miserable. This is why people want you to be miserable, because they don't understand why they're miserable. They won't admit why they're miserable. Because buried in their bones, there's an ache that they can't ignore. And part of that ache speaks to the next thing I want to talk about. There's something breaking at the brick of every wall that's holding all that you know. I didn't put that rest of it, but that's kind of the thing. That's the gist of it. There's something breaking at the brick of every wall that's holding all that you know. Jesus used the parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin in Luke chapter 15 to teach that God pursues us. When the coin's lost, when the sheep's lost, the owner, the shepherd, goes searching. And they're not just going, well, yeah, it'll turn up. I mean, tearing the house apart looking for the coin, leaving the the 99 to go searching for the one. In Ephesians, Paul tells us that our reconciling peace is Jesus. By dying as our sacrifice, he has broken down every wall of prejudice that separated us and now has made us equal through our union with Christ. Two have now become one, and we live restored to God and reconciled in the body of Christ. Jesus' mission on earth was to seek and save that which is lost. To seek something is to pursue it, to go after it. Yet, again, when we look back at our last point, and what we talked about earlier, the problem is people pursue the wrong things. They pursue money, fame, fortune, love, because they're important things. They should hold some importance to us, yes, but they shouldn't be what we are looking for to fulfill us. Because these things can never fulfill us. They can barely fill us, much less fulfill us. Yet, here's the irony in that. We pursue those things that are important to us, but God pursues that which is important to him. Why did God create earth? Because he needed a place for his people. He knew he was going to create you and I and all his people. He needed a place for us. were important to him. He put everything in order so that we would have what we needed. Now, lastly, lumped in with those two other parables is the third parable. And we talked about that last week in Sunday school. It's the parable of the prodigal son, right? And it's important to understand that all of us, we're all prodigals. We've all turned away and then realized, wait a minute. If I just go back, maybe, just maybe, my Father will welcome me back. I mean, even if he just puts me to work. And the Father stands there and opens his arms wide open. Well, there's a line in the song that says, where the runaways are running the night. And I'm changing that in my mind to say we're the prodigals. You see, P.T. Barnum went out and he took the lost, the forgotten, the dismissed of society and gave them a place and put them in a place of prominence. Again, people will say all kinds of nasty things, and I've never heard any of it in any years except for recently now. And all of a sudden, he was really he was really making fun of him. He was a bad guy. But I've never heard any of that for all the years leading up. Oh man, I probably just hid that from everybody. No, whatever. You don't get to change the narrative because it's convenient for you. But the bottom line, people who were thrown out by their own families because they were freaks, he gave them a purpose. He gave them a life that they wouldn't normally have. Who did God choose? A guy named Moses? Rahab. Gideon. David. He was a shepherd. Again, remember we've talked about that. The lowest of the low. Worst job ever. Like the sanitation guy or the sewer cleaning guy. And on and on and on. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, he said, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. God chose things despised by the world, things counted as nothing at all, and used them to bring to nothing what the world considers important. Another song comes to mind when I think of that scripture. Casting Crowns. I'm just a nobody. Boy, do I not relate to that song. But for those who want to argue Old Testament stuff, let's look at New Testament. Look at Jesus' choices. Who he chose to follow him. Here's the disciples, fishermen, a tax collector. Not one scholar amongst them ran into a guy on the road to Damascus, a murderer. I hadn't got to me yet, honey. That's where I was going, though. Me. And I know a lot of y'all you just know me here, but but here's the thing. The same can be true and is true for each and every one of y'all. And it's only can come true because with God, nothing is impossible and all things are possible. The song says, the impossible comes true. During Gabriel's visit with Mary, he said, for nothing will be impossible with God. And Jesus said that, but with God, all things are possible. So I just want to be clear because Gabriel was God's spokesman. So when he said, for nothing is impossible with God, that's coming out of God's mouth. And Jesus is God. So when he says that, but with God, all things are possible, the impossible comes true. And the promise of impossible coming true is also for you. The disciples at one point, they were frustrated and aggravated because this guy brought his son who was demon-possessed and they couldn't figure out how to, they couldn't do it. They were like, go, whatever, and just couldn't. Jesus came down off the mountain and he's like, at least that's how I see it. It's like, and the disciples are like, after he did it, they pull him aside and they're like, all right, so why can't we do it? What's up? Why can't we do it? I mean, we're with you. We learn from you. And Jesus said this. He said, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. You believe that nothing is impossible for you? Because I don't think we often live like it is. I think we often live like there are limitations to what we can do. And we're limited by our own strength, by our own understanding, by our own whatever. And I think sometimes we don't give faith enough credit. Because like I told you last week, faith is not about you. Faith is about God. So really what you're saying, and I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, because,